Incredible twist. Disrespected black FBI agent turns the tables on cop in just 120 seconds. Malik Johnson gripped the steering wheel tighter, the leather warm against his palms, as he navigated the familiar streets of his childhood in Atlanta. The gritty vibrancy of his neighborhood was palpable, filled with echoes of laughter and the soothing symphony of life, yet it was shadowed by sorrow and tension. Beneath the badge that signified his role as an FBI agent lay the heavy burden of expectations, dreams stitched together from his family's struggles. Disdainful glances from local police hung in the air like smoke, the implication clear. He was a traitor. Disrespected at every corner, he was both an outsider and a protector, caught in a world where bias whispered in hushed tones and shouted in the open. As news fluttered through the streets about Jamal, a young boy pinned as the culprit of a rash of robberies, Malik's heart thudded against his chest, igniting an unshakable determination within him. This boy was a reflection of himself, carrying burdens too heavy for his slender shoulders. Malik's pulse quickened at the thought. Jamal had faced the same struggles, and now he was fighting against a system that often twisted justice to fit its own narrative. He leaned forward, almost stretching toward the whispers that filled his mind. Will anyone defend him? The question loomed like a dark cloud. It was an act of empathy that propelled him. Data would lead him to truths hidden beneath layers of bias. Would anyone truly listen? Could he expose the system that time and again betrayed those it swore to protect? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As Malik delved deeper into the case, each piece of evidence brought a painful clarity to how far the rot had penetrated the precinct. A damning pattern of misconduct emerged, and he felt a fire igniting within him, stoking the embers of his family's teachings. He recalled his mother's words with sharp clarity. Fight for what is right, even if you must do it alone. What if the investigation propelled him into a battle for justice against Samuels, the cop who dismissed Jamal as merely another name in a long list of offenses? Tension coiled inside him, winding tighter like the cheap watch around his wrist. With every ounce of courage, Malik prepared to confront Officer Samuels, who relished his power, viewing the badge as an emblem of superiority rather than service. The precinct felt murky and hostile, shadows creeping against the cold fluorescent lights, symbolic of the corruption lurking just beneath the surface. As they exchanged heated words in that empty room, Malik's breath felt hurried, the weight of disapproval palpable. Samuels leaned back, arrogantly dismissing the evidence piled before him, a smear campaign against a child's life. Malik's heart raced, caught between defending Jamal and clinging to his own dignity. Doubt began to creep in like a cold breeze. Was this pursuit worth it? As he stared deep into Samuel's ice-cold gaze, he felt time slow around them, the air thick with unresolved tension teetering on a knife's edge. The confrontation swelled, pushing Malik into a dizzying vertigo of right and wrong, leaving the fate of his integrity and principles hanging in a balance that might just tip over. How far was he willing to go? Just beyond this moment, a change felt imminent yet uncertain, threatening to unearth truths he'd long buried. Essential battles of identity and honor lay at stake, leaving Malik poised on the cusp of profound transformation, while Jamal's plea for justice echoed through the corridor of his thoughts, heralding a tumultuous turning point ahead. Malik stepped back from Samuels, his hands visibly trembling. Anger collided with fear, igniting an emotional storm within him. In that tense moment, he felt the stirrings of doubt, not just about the case, but about himself. Was he capable of challenging an entrenched system? What fear had held him back for so long? He had preserved the facade of professionalism as a shield, but at what cost? A surge of clarity accompanied the doubt. This wasn't solely about defending Jamal, it was about redefining who he was. Every dismissal, every derisive stare, every attempt to belittle him, it all screamed for his resistance. This was the catalyst he had long sought, the test he secretly craved. As thoughts cascaded through his mind, Malik's tactical instincts kicked in. He considered his next steps carefully, each decision forming in his mind like a chess move. He would confront Samuels again, but with meticulous preparation this time. Malik retraced his research in the precinct's labyrinth of records and uncovered a disturbing history. The officer had a history of disproportionate force, and several complaints lodged against him, typically swept under the rug. It was time to turn the tide. Power gave way to due diligence. He immersed himself in connecting the dots. Night after night, he studied the patterns, revealing the personal stakes behind each report, each statistic. Jamal's case wasn't solely an indictment of the boy. It symbolized a systemic suffocation of hope, one that Malik couldn't ignore. There was a name for the silence he had observed. It was complicity. A chain linking both police and community to an unspoken agreement of betrayal. Days turned to a week, and as Malik walked into the precinct, he carried a folder thick with evidence. He felt the weight of every judgment resting heavily on his shoulders, yet he stood taller. This moment would define him, though uncertainty gnawed at the edges of his resolve. He summoned every ounce of strength to confront Samuels again, understanding that this time it was more than just professional, it was personal. Malik waited until Samuels was alone, a brooding figure hunched over his desk. The air grew strained with unspoken resentment as Malik's footsteps echoed against the tile floor. Samuels looked up, and the corner of his mouth twitched in an arrogant smirk, but this time it didn't faze Malik. "It's time we have another conversation," Malik stated, his voice steady but laced with determination. He dared to lay out the evidence in front of Samuels, each piece a deliberate strike against the facade of authority. Samuels exploded, lashing out with insults designed to provoke fear. But Malik had prepared for this. He had processed every conceivable obstacle and strategized through the chaos that awaited. It was as if he could feel his family behind him, those same teachings urging him forward. "Make your threats if you must, but know this. I won't allow you to corrupt another life without consequence," Malik replied, resolute. Each word was a release, a part of himself he had kept hidden for so long, pushing through an unyielding wall of fear. His heart raced, adrenaline coursing through him, igniting the fire within. As Malik prepared for his next moves, he realized something essential. The investigation was not just a means to rectify the wrongs inflicted upon Jamal. In confronting Samuels, Malik was wrestling with his own internalized fears and biases. He was learning how to dismantle the ingrained beliefs that had shackled him for far too long. Transformed by the confrontation, he felt the thrill of empowerment, a new chapter commencing within him. Yet even as he relished this newfound strength, uncertainty loomed ahead. Could he bear the weight of the backlash that might follow? But there was no turning back now. The time had come to face not just the external threat embodied in Samuels, but to face the depths of his own convictions. It was a volatile conflict waiting to explode, and within that tumultuous moment, it was clear. Malik was ready to change the narrative, but was the system ready for him? As he stood there, a reckoning awaited both outside and within, and the path ahead loomed uncertain, yet brimming with possibility. With the confrontation still buzzing in his veins, Malik retreated to his office, each step echoing the fear he had defied. The chaotic whispers of his heart settled into a determined rhythm. He had confronted Samuels, but now the real battle lay ahead, not just with systemic corruption, but within himself. Here he was, on the precipice of transformation, yet every possible consequence of his actions loomed like a dark cloud overhead. He sat at his cluttered desk, the file before him an intimidating weight. Each piece of evidence, once a mere collection of papers, had transformed into a battlement, his last stand against an oppressive tide. The sunlight filtered weakly through the blinds, casting striped shadows across his workspace, a visual metaphor for the division that had long plagued his life. Light piercing through darkness, but always retaining a jagged edge. As he rifled through the documents, a nagging voice in his head whispered doubts. Was he doing the right thing? Could he really take on an officer so entrenched in power? Malik pushed the thoughts away, forcing himself to rise above. He understood that readiness came not from the absence of fear, but from the mastery over it. He had to embrace this internal conflict, not as an impediment, but as fuel for his resolve. He reached for his notebook, the one filled with scribbled thoughts and half-developed ideas. This was where he began to strategize, not just on the case, but on the methodology of his approach. As he made bullet points, outlining evidence and preparing arguments, he found a new clarity. The disjointed fragments of a once-broken man were aligning into a coherent strategy. Each point reminded him of the seriousness of this fight, not just for Jamal, but for everyone who had been overshadowed by the system's might. Reflecting on the conversations he'd had with mentors over the years, Malik began to incorporate their teachings into his strategies. He recalled the words of his old professor, urging him to engage not just in the fight, but in understanding the power dynamics at play. Every word from the past echoed back, fueling his preparations with deeper wisdom. A plan began to take form, not merely to confront Samuels again, but to gather allies. Malik realized that he could not do this alone. He needed the support of his colleagues, the legal team, anyone capable of amplifying his voice. He'd been focused purely on the individual confrontation, but perhaps the most effective approach would be to create a coalition aimed at exposing the malignance festering within the department. He reached for his phone, hands trembling slightly as he typed out a text to his trusted colleagues, inviting them for an impromptu meeting. He knew that together they could forge stronger arguments, build a narrative that would be more than mere allegations. It would be truth backed by undeniable evidence. The thought of collaboration thrilled him. It was an antidote to the isolation that had once stifled his spirit. As Malik awaited their responses, he felt the stirring of hope against the backdrop of uncertainty. Yet there was something deeper, a thought simmering beneath. The sexiness of power had once seduced him into silence, but now intrigue spun about the act of rebellion. The anticipation of their responses brought forth a mixture of excitement and fear, a cocktail of anticipation that could propel him either into triumph or down a spiral of repercussions. Could his plea for solidarity go unheeded, or would it ignite a fire? Malik leaned back, the tension of his choices pressing against him, way heavy, yet invigorating. He was not the man who had cowered before Samuels a week ago. No, he was reborn with vigor and purpose. Outside the precinct, the echoes of day-to-day life continued unperturbed, unaware of the tempest stirring within its confines. Malik had come to terms with his future, yet questions lingered. Was he truly ready to embrace the collective struggle, and would he hold steadfast against the pushback that would surely come? As his phone buzzed with unread messages, one thing was clear. The battle was only just beginning, and it was going to take more than just courage to fuel this revolution. Malik steadied his breath, feeling the weight of inevitability. Every decision had consequences, each move bore risks. He would soon find out if he had the strength to face not just the external antagonism, but also the tumultuous journey within himself that awaited. What new alliances would he forge, and with them could he change the course of this corrupt narrative once and for all? The moment of truth lay just ahead. The rhythmic buzz of anticipation vibrated through Malik as he stared at his phone, the messages an elusive promise of solidarity. Each notification was a potential lifeline, a chance for unity against the gargantuan walls of corruption he sought to dismantle. But beneath the hope lay a swell of apprehension. His previous vulnerabilities still whispered in the recesses of his mind, questioning whether anyone would rally around his cause. Then came the first response. Sarah, a fierce advocate known for her investigative prowess, agreed to meet. Her unwavering principles had always inspired Malik. She had the righteousness that ignited a fire within the team. Following her, reactions from others flowed in, each message seeming like a step forward, solidifying the coalition he envisioned. Yet, as optimism surged, so did an unsettling understanding of the stakes at hand. Malik's core mantra echoed. It wasn't merely about gathering evidence. It was about creating a movement resilient enough to withstand the inevitable backlash. Confronting systemic issues meant exposing personal narratives that often sought to remain hidden. The potential harm from repercussions loomed larger than ever, as he understood that those who dared to disrupt the status quo rarely emerged unscathed. With his allies on board, the logistics of the meeting occupied his mind. Malik couldn't help but imagine the gathering. A tight circle, fueled by determination, sharing insights like puzzle pieces leading to a unified vision. He knew the conference room at the precinct would feel suffocating, but he needed the close quarters to foster a synthesis of ideas. Every breath would weigh with the gravity of their endeavor. Arriving at the office early, he took the extra moment to collect himself. He walked the perimeter, enveloping himself in the familiar sights and sounds of operation, seeking a sense of calm in the chaos. Yet, as he examined the walls plastered with commendations and photographs, a dissonance roared within him. Those accolades adorned the very institution that had shielded Samuels, a monument to a legacy that suppressed truth instead of revealing it. The irony felt tangible in the pit of his stomach. He was now stepping into the very shadows of his fears, armed with a resolve that aimed to scatter them. The clock ticked mercilessly toward the meeting time. Each tick seemed like a drumbeat, loud and commanding. Malik took a deep breath, reciting the fundamentals of civility and clarity. When his team assembled, a motley crew of individuals driven by passion and ethics, the energy shifted palpably. Passionate voices arose, intertwining stories of their own encounters with institutional neglect. Each testimony built an intricate fabric of shared experiences, underscored by the urgency of their mission. As the meeting reached a crescendo, Malik harnessed the collective momentum, binding their spirits with focus. Together, we aren't simply confronting Samuels, we are challenging a culture that thrives on silence, he declared, his voice unwavering. There was a spark in the room, a palpable fire ignited by collective purpose. But in the midst of forging alliances, Malik felt an unsettling revelation sink in. The weight of compromise and the ethics of collective dissent began to loom larger than before. What if he had to sacrifice individual relationships for the sake of the greater good? Was he prepared to confront colleagues who might hesitate at the edge of moral complexity? Such realizations brought clarity, yet invited a darker inquiry into his motivations. As discussions turned strategic, framing how to release the evidence to the public, doubts began whispering again. Malik surveyed his colleagues, their minds sharpening with ambitions aligned, unaware of the impending storm. He felt like he was standing on the edge of an abyss, ready to leap but unsure where he'd land. Suddenly the door swung open. It was Sarah, her expression a blend of resolve and concern. "Malik, we have a problem. Samuel's caught wind of our plan," she announced. The room's energy shifted instantly, the air thickening with tension. The collective breath held in anticipation was palpable, driving home the fleeting nature of their accomplishments. Malik's heart raced, thoughts racing about betrayal or potential sabotage. The clock was ticking, and the battle had transitioned from conception into a racing reality. How could they regroup and pivot? The answers hung tantalizingly just out of reach, the stakes climbing in ways Malik never anticipated. What would Malik do now that they were in the crosshairs? The scent of reckoning engulfed him, demanding immediate action. The fight wasn't merely about gathering evidence, it was about restaging the battle on his terms. With Samuels now aware, how would he redirect the course of this gathering storm? The moment required an instant decision. What path forward would he and his allies take against an adversary now anticipating their moves? Malik could feel the heat of the impending storm pressing in, the moment fast approaching, where every choice could shift the balance irrevocably. Malik's mind spun as the implications of Sarah's words sank in. Samuels was a formidable opponent, well entrenched and equipped with resources that could easily destroy their fragile coalition. Malik's instinct was to retreat, to reassess the situation from a distance. But with each second that passed, he could feel his allies' anticipation shifting to anxiety. They needed a plan, and they needed one fast. "All right, what do we know?" he asked, feeling the weight of leadership press heavily on his shoulders. Sarah opened her mouth, ready to respond, but Malik held up a hand. "Let's focus. This is a critical moment for us." As he glanced around the room, the atmosphere shifted from excitement to a palpable tension. Each ally's face reflected a complex mix of fear and determination. Suddenly, Malik was overcome with a sense of purpose. It was time to confront his fear head-on, to lean into the discomfort that had always tinged his ambitions. He turned to Sarah, whose earlier resolve seemed tempered by the gravity of the news. "We have to outmaneuver him, use his own game against him," he proposed, excitement blooming within him. "We need to go public quickly, but we won't just throw a press release. We'll frame it in a way that catches attention and compels action." Sarah's brow furrowed as she digested his words. "You mean mobilizing media? That could backfire. What if he decides to retaliate?" "Let him," Malik said, his voice low and firm. "The more he reacts, the more attention he draws to his own corruption. We can't be afraid of his power. We'll use every blow he strikes against us to galvanize support." Silence enveloped the room as Malik's team processed his bold declaration. Deep within him, a fire ignited. Perhaps they could turn the tide. This wasn't just an opportunity to elicit change. It was an opening for personal transformation, an avenue for Malik to prove his worth. The thrill of defiance coursed through him, turning his apprehension into electricity. Sarah leaned forward, her expression softening. "I always knew you had this in you, Malik, but we need to be meticulous. What's our message? Who are we targeting?" Her questions pricked at the ever-evolving strategist within him. "First, we detail the facts we have. We focus on every interview, every document, every whisper of truth. And we send it out strategically. Respected journalists, influencers, anyone who cares enough to shine a light on this," he explained, thoughts crystallizing as each word left his mouth. As they plunged deeper into strategy, Malik's mind flickered back to his initial motivations. He had once been the idealist, venturing into this world fueled only by dreams of justice. Now he felt the sharpened edges of reality slice at those dreams, forcing him to grapple with his own limitations. He would need to negotiate with his colleagues and perhaps sacrifice a few long-held beliefs along the way. What haunted him were the ethical ramifications hovering like specters over their plans. Were they truly prepared to navigate these murky waters? Challenges would come, and with them the painful possibility of having to betray not only connections, but also parts of himself that had long been cherished. "We also need to consider our safety," Malik cautioned, his voice steady. "If Samuels is onto us, he'll stop at nothing. We may need to go underground for a while." In that moment, he recognized the painful truth. Victory often came at a steep cost, yet there was no denying the empowerment surging within him. They were taking risks. Yes, real, immediate risks. Yet wasn't it in the choices that seemed the most dangerous that he discovered who he truly was? Just as he felt the team rallying around a budding strategy fueled by adrenaline, the phone vibrated again on the table. Malik snatched it up compulsively, adrenaline dialing the tension up further. It was a message from an anonymous source. "I know what you're planning. Samuels won't take this lightly. Be prepared for the repercussions." Malik felt his heart drop at the implications. They were being watched, and the enemy was more vigilant than he had anticipated. As uncertainty blossomed heavy in the air, Malik tightened his grip on the phone, adrenaline lacing his next thoughts with a mix of fear and determination. If the storm was closing in, he would need to lead them forward, deeper than ever into the fray. What would he say next? The weight of impending confrontation loomed larger than ever. With whispers of shadows at their backs, how would he redefine the rules in the chaos that awaited? The clock was ticking, and he felt ready to plunge into the unknown. Malik's thumb hovered over the screen, the weight of the anonymous alert escalating his urgency. The words echoed in his mind. He felt exposed, like a solitary lighthouse in a stormy sea. His team was depending on him, and the burden felt colossal. Who could it be? Sarah broke the silence, her voice slicing through the tension. Malik met her gaze, searching for clarity. It was moments like this that he had to redirect the fear swirling within him into calculated action. "What if it's a trap?" she continued, eyebrows knitting together in concern. "It could be," he admitted, swallowing hard. "But we can't afford to assume it's just a scare tactic. We need to fortify our strategy and anticipate Samuel's next move." Sarah nodded, visibly steeling herself for whatever was coming. Malik could feel the crackle of energy in the room shifting. Determination was replacing foreboding. He inspired himself further, leaning into that fire growing inside. This was an opportunity to step up, not just as a leader, but as a strategist capable of playing a long game. "First, we should split up to gather more intel. Sarah, liaise with the journalists, secure our contacts. We need to be stealthy, but also aggressive in our approach," he commanded, the words flowing with newfound conviction. "I'll reach out to some of my contacts in tech. We need to set up a secure communications channel, one that Samuels wouldn't suspect." The team nodded in agreement, their fear morphing into a quiet resolve, inspired by Malik's urgency. He felt the power of alignment, a rare harmony emerging between their common goal and personal stakes. Each member was coming together to navigate a perilous challenge. As they dispersed, Malik's mind raced through a myriad of scenarios. He had to confront the specter of ethical compromise, balancing transparency with the necessity of subterfuge, a tightrope walk he had never had to attempt before. Would he have to massage the truth to fit their narrative? Within that unsettling thought lay the possibility of transformation, a fork in his moral path that he hadn't anticipated. Tentatively, he slid his phone into his pocket, as if the device itself were a ticking clock, counting down to an uncertain confrontation. Absorbing the sudden solitude in the dimly lit conference room, he felt the weight of snake-like shadows lurking at the edges of his consciousness. He was teetering on the precipice of a change he could neither fully comprehend nor reverse. Malik made his way to a nearby cafe, his usual haunt where he could think freely. Stepping into the place, he ordered a strong coffee and took a seat away from the bustling crowd. Here lies the irony. Once he was the bold idealist, engaging in fervent debates about justice while envisioning a heroic path. Now he was evolving into something else, a cunning tactician, cradling the tension between intention and manipulation. As he sipped the steaming brew, a sudden realization struck him. The stakes had shifted dramatically. He was no longer just fighting for a cause. This was increasingly personal, and he faced the unsettling reality of potential betrayal, not just from Samuel's, but from the chilling prospect of his own decisions altering who he had believed himself to be. Malik leaned back, exhaling as shadows danced across the walls of his mind. Every strategic maneuver felt like a chess piece, dragging him further from his initial vision of integrity. There were too many unknowns, but one thing pulsed within him: a growing awareness of his capability to shape this narrative, to wear the mask of both light and dark as needed. The ringing of his phone broke his thoughts, and he answered it instinctively. It was a source, someone with information that could change everything. "I have a lead for you," the voice on the line said, urgency lacing every syllable. "You need to meet me. I can't say more over the phone." In that moment, Malik felt the tide shifting, adrenaline pumping through him again. Vulnerability twisted into opportunity. But this encounter could open the door to devastating consequences. Could he handle the truth, no matter how it unraveled his carefully constructed plans? As he weighed his options, the question settled in his heart. Was he ready to face the deeper shadows of his own aspirations? Each heartbeat thrummed louder, a harbinger of the imminent confrontation that awaited him. Was he prepared to dive into a truth that could either redeem or destroy him? With a decisive breath, he prepared to embrace the unknown head-on. Malik crossed the bustling cafe, his thoughts spiraling with each step as he sought an isolated corner where distractions would be minimal. He found a seat against the wall, the cacophony of chatter and clinking dishes fading into a vague background hum. He needed clarity before the meeting, a moment to sift through the flood of emotions and calculations. The voice on the other end of the line lingered in his mind. A lead. His relentless focus narrowed onto that single promise, flickering with the allure of hidden truths. Yet, deep down, Malik wrestled with a grim sense of doubt. What if this lead was just another manipulation, another thread spun by the web of deceit he was desperate to unravel? Leaning forward, he rubbed his temples, the tension knotting in his shoulders. He had always prided himself on being perceptive, reading between the lines with skill, but this time felt different. Was it fear or intuition pushing him to rethink his approach? With each breath, he fought the panic rising within him, reminding himself of the stakes involved. This wasn't just any lead, it was a lifeline that could tether him to the truth or pull him into a quagmire of deception. As he settled into a contemplative silence, he realized he had become a stranger navigating unfamiliar terrain. He hadn't intended to emerge as a strategist spinning half-truths, yet here he was, caught in a game of shadows. In those early days of his career, Malik had considered himself a guiding light, a champion for the innocent. Now, the very battles he fought threatened to shatter his sense of self. He reached for his coffee, but the rich aroma brought only a fleeting moment of comfort. Instead, a stark thought crystallized in his mind. His transformation was not just about adaptability, it was about survival. These choices were molding him into something he wasn't sure he recognized anymore. The fine line between ethical integrity and strategic pragmatism was blurring at an alarming pace, and Malik couldn't afford to falter. As he focused on the delicate balance he now had to maintain between staying true to his ideals and ensuring the safety of his team, his phone vibrated again. The screen lit up, a message containing a time and location for the meeting. His heart raced. The moment had arrived. He had little time to think, every instinct telling him to act decisively. Drawing in a deep breath, he rose from his seat, feeling the weight of uncertainty. He tucked his phone back into his pocket, the gesture signaling a readiness to confront whatever awaited him. Each step toward the meeting was both exciting and terrifying. Thoughts of betrayal danced in the periphery of his mind, gnawing at him like a persistent shadow. He arrived at the agreed-upon location, A quiet park on the outskirts of the city. The sound of rustling leaves blended with the distant noise of traffic, creating an uneasy backdrop to the gathering sense of inevitable confrontation. As he paced nervously by a fountain, he questioned his ability to assess this lead's implications. Would it fortify his journey toward justice, or would it lead him deeper into a moral abyss? Suddenly, Malik spotted a figure emerging from the tree line. Instinctively, he braced himself, his mind racing through various scenarios. Would this source prove valuable, or had he just walked into a trap? "Malik," the figure called out, his voice low but urgent. This was it, the moment where Malik would have to confront not only the external threat, but the chaos brewing inside. Who had he become, and what was he willing to sacrifice for the truth? As he took a step forward, ready to face the unknown, he couldn't shake the thought that the answers ahead could rearrange the pieces of the life he thought he understood. Would the truth reveal an even darker reality, or an unexpected path to redemption? The air crackled with tension, and Malik knew there would be no turning back. The time had come to meet the shadows of his aspirations head-on. Malik stood frozen, the figure before him becoming clearer in the dappled sunlight filtering through the trees. It was Jonah, an old associate whose past involvement in various cases had left a mark on Malik's career. His presence here was unexpected, and that alone added another layer of complexity to Malik's already tangled web of thoughts. Wordlessly, Jonah approached, his expression a mixture of urgency and caution. Malik's instincts flared, scanning Jonah for any signs of deceit. "Malik, we need to talk," Jonah said, glancing around as if the trees might be eavesdropping. "It's about the lead. It's not what it seems." Each word landed heavily in Malik's chest, sparking a mix of anxiety and curiosity. He had anticipated deception, yet he hadn't expected an immediate confrontation. He felt the ground beneath him shift. Could Jonah be the critical pivot in his understanding of the truth, or had he made a colossal mistake in trusting him? "Then let's talk," Malik replied, his voice steady but not devoid of the underlying tension. Jonah gestured toward a bench nestled against the fountain. They settled in. The gentle splashes of water contrasted sharply with the whirlwind of thoughts racing in Malik's mind. "Look," Jonah continued, leaning in, "this lead comes from a source that's been feeding misinformation on purpose. They want you to chase shadows, to divert your attention from something bigger, something dangerous." Malik felt a tightening in his throat. The ambiguous fear of betrayal gnawed at him. "And you know this. How? If you're dragging me into another dead-end chase, I swear—" "I'm not," Jonah interjected, urgency rising. "I've seen the inconsistencies in the reports coming out about the case you're working. They're using you, Malik. They're using us all." As Jonah spoke, Malik's mind engaged in an intense debate, trying to decipher the reality of this unexpected alliance. Jonah had not earned Malik's trust easily in the past, yet here they were, two agents navigating the murky waters of their circumstances together. "Why now? Why risk your position to tell me this?" Malik pushed, searching for any indication of Jonah's hidden motives. "Because I've been in your shoes," Jonah replied quietly. "Chasing the truth when everything around you is designed to blind you. You can't let them use your trust against you." For a moment, Malik weighed Jonah's words, the depth of their implications striking him hard. The notion that he might have been manipulated felt like a punch to the gut. Each choice he made, every adjustment he had molded himself into, suddenly felt like it could be swept away by a single revelation. Who could he trust? "No more games, Jonah," Malik said finally, steel creeping into his voice. "If we're going to do this, you need to show me. Prove your information is credible. If not, we're done here." Jonah's expression hardened, the slight crease of uncertainty spreading across his brow. "Fair enough, but you need to move quickly. The clock is ticking, and I don't know how much longer I can cover for you." Malik's instincts surged, a whirlwind of thoughts pushing him to action. The stakes had shifted again. They were no longer mere players in the game. They were potential targets. The whispers of betrayal were like acidic fumes, corroding the foundation of trust he had fought so hard to maintain. As they stood to part ways, Malik felt the weight of his decisions thrumming in his veins. Finding the underlying truth would require more than intuition. It would demand a re-evaluation of everything he believed about himself, his allies, and the nature of justice itself. With each step away from Jonah, the urgency surged within him. He had to act, to discern the truth from fiction, and perhaps to redefine the very essence of who he was becoming. But as he considered the looming darkness ahead, a new thought clawed at the edges of his mind. What if in seeking the truth, he unwittingly unleashed something he could never rein in? The air buzzed with an electric tension as Malik jogged toward his car, a singular thought at the forefront of his mind. Time was no longer on his side, and every moment that passed might pull him deeper into a reality he wasn't prepared to face. Malik gripped the steering wheel tightly as he maneuvered through the winding roads, his thoughts spiraling into a relentless storm. The fear of betrayal gnawed at his core, but so did the growing determination to prove Jonah wrong. Each second that ticked away reminded him of the stakes, his credibility, his career, the very essence of who he was. As he parked outside his office, he noticed the faded sign overhead, Integrity Division. The irony hit him like a punch. Integrity was precisely what felt compromised at this moment. He took a deep breath, steadied himself, and stepped inside. The fluorescent lights buzzed, illuminating a corridor filled with familiar faces, each loaded with unspoken questions and scrutinizing glances. Malik's heart raced as he approached his desk, his pulse sinking with the urgency of the situation. Reports and files piled high, but none of them held the answers he desperately sought. He needed clarity, and he needed it fast. As he settled into his chair, another thought intruded. If Jonah was right, the reports he had painstakingly dissected might be nothing more than a smokescreen. He flexed his fingers over the keyboard, intent on digging deeper into the case that had dominated his life for weeks. Searching through layers of data, he uncovered inconsistencies, details that had initially seemed innocuous, but began to form a threading pattern that was undeniably deliberate. His instincts had not led him astray. Perhaps he was chasing more than just shadows. As he methodically pieced together the fragments of information, Malik could feel his analytical mind sharpening. It wasn't just about proving Jonah wrong anymore. It was about reclaiming his own narrative. He glanced up briefly, catching sight of a colleague watching with a mixture of skepticism and concern. A sense of isolation enveloped him, driving him deeper into his investigation. The sensation stoked a flicker of anger within him. Betrayal wasn't just a personal blow, it represented a collective failure to uphold justice. Hours melted away as he zeroed in on one particular lead, a confidential informant whose history with the department was murky at best. Malik's resolve solidified. If he were to confront the potential puppeteers in this game, he would need support, not just from Jonah, but from his own network. That meant revisiting the lines drawn between trust and deceit. He reached for his phone, his fingers hovering above the keys as he prepared to connect with another former associate, Renee. They had tangled with dangerous threats together before, and she had always stood firm when things got dicey, but reaching out would mean risking vulnerability, exposing a fear of being outmaneuvered yet again. Did he have the strength to bridge that gap? The answer came in a flash, yes. If he wanted to transcend the shadows closing in around him, he needed to shed the weight of hesitation. It was time to lean into his relationships, to embrace collaboration rather than tread alone. With resolve, he pressed dial, the sound of ringing echoing ominously in the muted office, a signal of the decisions that lay ahead. "I'm in." Renee's voice vibrated through the line, her tone laced with immediate understanding. "You've found something, haven't you?" Malik hesitated momentarily, but the previous hours of investigation gave him the strength to share his findings. The gravity of her support ignited a spark within him. "I have, and I think I need your help navigating it." The drive to uncover the truth, now fortified by renewed alliances, began to drown out the rumble of doubt. The tightrope of trust transformed into a stepping stone towards reclaiming his agency and forming a strategy to confront the looming threat. They spoke through the minutiae of the case, brainstorming possible leads and connections. Each idea exchanged felt like a hammer striking a nail, fastening his path forward with clarity and intent. The conversation shifted from mere theory to actionable plans, and Malik felt the dawning realization wash over him. This was not just about exposure, but rather personal growth beyond the confines of past betrayals. The phone call ended, but something new lingered in the air. He wasn't merely racing against the encroaching darkness, he was crafting light to illuminate the path ahead. And just as that realization settled, an unsettling thought flared again. What if unveiling the truth meant risking more than his career? A predetermined notification pinged, jolting him back. He received a message from Jonah. "Meeting tomorrow?" Urgent details revealed about the source. The clock was turning again. The time had come to face not just the truth, but potentially the storm that followed its unveiling. Malik Johnson stepped into the conference room the next day, heart pounding with the determination of the unsung heroes he'd always admired. He had traversed a tumultuous landscape of doubt over the past week, yet now clarity carved a path through the fog. In this moment he was ready to wield the power of truth, armed with the integrity he had fought for all those years. He was no longer simply a pawn in a game. He had become a player possessing knowledge. Jonah was already seated, visibly on edge. The tension in the room felt electric as Malik pulled out the folder filled with evidence against Officer Samuels. He had gone from doubting his instincts to trusting them completely. This case was about far more than Jamal. It encapsulated an entire culture desperate for accountability. "Let's get straight to it," Malik began, his voice steady as he laid the evidence on the table. "We can't allow Samuels to twist the narrative anymore. Here's the confirmatory testimony from our informant, corroborated by the documentation we've gathered. This is the moment we turn the tide." Jonah leaned forward, the skepticism he had worn like armor beginning to crack. "Do you really think this will make a difference? Samuels has the department backing him. They're a fortress, Malik." A fire ignited within Malik, fueled by the injustices he had witnessed. A fortress only stands as long as its foundation is strong. We expose the cracks, we unveil the truth, and we build a narrative that demands justice, he stated passionately. His words hung in the air like a palpable promise. They discussed the strategy, honing in on mobilizing their allies and reaching out to influential contacts in the media. This wasn't merely a rush to gather the public eye. They needed to present a calculated front, revealing personal stories intertwined with cold, hard facts. It was time to elevate the voices that had been silenced for too long. As they fleshed out their plan, Malik leaned into his newfound skills. He felt empowered, not just as an agent, but as a conduit for change. Each piece they discussed strengthened his resolve. He was forging a path littered with risks, but also filled with potential. When they departed, Malik's mind raced with the implications of the decisions that lay ahead. He reached out to his colleagues, garnering their support and inviting them to witness the evidence he had meticulously compiled. This was no longer a solo venture. It was a movement gaining momentum, and he was at the forefront. The following day, they gathered in the precinct, Malik standing tall and resolute amid the push and pull of apprehensive murmurs. His colleagues surrounded him, Individuals he had once viewed through the lens of mistrust, who now rallied to contribute to something greater than themselves. The shared commitment solidified the sense that they were indeed capable of rewriting the shadowy narratives shrouding their community. "Listen to me," Malik began, his voice cutting through the palpable tension. "We're not just fighting an individual. We're standing against a culture that has flourished on coercion. Today, we make sure our voices resonate with purpose." With eager nods of agreement, they reviewed and reinforced the findings. In that room, Malik felt for the first time that he was not simply an agent, but a catalyst for change, shifting the paradigm of his professional identity towards one fueled by integrity and a shared vision. Days turned into a week, and as the story began to break in the media, it gained traction. Victims became visible, their stories starting to unravel the tangled web of deceit. Malik's heart swelled with pride. He had not only transformed his narrative, but had become a conduit for others' journeys towards justice. A week later, he received an unexpected email from the department's Internal Affairs Division, a case review. They requested a meeting to discuss potential reforms suggested by his evidence. It was here, at that moment, that Malik acknowledged a quiet satisfaction. Against the odds, the seed of change he had planted was germinating. As he walked through the precinct, the disapproving glares from before had faded into nods of approval. There was a recognition emerging. His professional integrity had evolved into an established reputation for fairness, evoking admiration and respect. Malik's transformation was culminating before him. He had conquered not only the injustice that surrounded him, but had also refuted the self-doubt that once tethered him. With each day, he felt a sturdy confidence replacing the weight of uncertainty. The shadows of his past, once crippling, were now transformed into stepping stones that elevated him towards fulfillment, a life committed to justice rather than merely compliance. The burdens began lifting as he embraced his role with newfound appreciation. As he prepared for his next challenge, an internal review addressing systemic reform, Malik relished the depth of his journey. He had confronted the biases both in his environment and within himself, until he stood firmly in the light with a sense of mission. His place in the world was redefining itself, rooted in authenticity rather than pretense. And in that final moment he promised himself he wouldn't turn back. Malik had forged his path, and now others could follow, emboldened by his example. This was more than a victory. It was a personal renaissance, a course correction that encapsulated who he had always aspired to become. In this newfound light, Malik emerged not merely as an agent, but as a beacon of hope, reshaping the narrative with every brave step he took. It was an undeniable testament to the power of accountability, a reminder that even in darkness, truth would always illuminate the way forward. Don't let this moment slip away. You need to subscribe now to the channel to keep up with these exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support for inspiring transformations. Comment your reactions and theories about this powerful ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this conclusion. Remember, the true champions of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting our journey together. Don't wait even one more second.